Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. My guest today is Matt Goodwin. He is Vice President of Medical Affairs at SC Pharmaceuticals. And we talk about the role of the MSL in launch preparedness for new products and indications. So it's a great conversation. Hope you guys love it. And if you do, please share it. And don't forget to join us for MSL Talk Live, which is on the LinkedIn Live platform. And look for announcements and follow me on LinkedIn for more information. Welcome to MSL Talk with Tom Caravela, a podcast specifically designed for MSLs and all things field medical. Hey, Matt, welcome to the podcast. How you doing, brother?
Doing great, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Dude, I'm so excited. So, guys, first of all, I lost my voice. So if I sound raspy, that's because I just got back from Puerto Rico. I was at MAPS. So if you've never been to the Medical Affairs Professional Society meeting, put it on your list. It's a great event each year. Had an awesome time. So forgive the raspiness in my voice, but want to welcome my buddy Matt Goodwin. He's amazing. And we have an interesting topic we're going to talk about that actually spans through from leadership down to MSLs and anybody interested in this role. So before we get into it, Matt, why don't you do an introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. So Matt Goodwin, I'm a Vice President of Medical Affairs at SC Pharmaceuticals. We're a small biotech in the Boston-based area, focused in the cardiology space. I'm a pharmacist by training. Went to school out at Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa. Got my PharmD and MBA, and then went and did a post-doctoral fellowship with Mass College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences and Cubist Pharmaceuticals. And so they were, a company in the early 2000s and into 2010 developing an antibiotic, Cubicin, and I worked there for 2 years in medical affairs and clinical research. And then I've spent the last probably 10 to 12 years working for a variety of different biotech companies. First started out as a manager in medical affairs, where I kind of did the MLR process, all things internal, developed resources for an MSL team, and just kind of a jack of all trades. And then that morphed into me ultimately becoming an MSL for about 5-6 years with a couple different companies, both small pharma and larger pharma. And then kind of worked my way into more leadership roles, leading a medical affairs department, and currently, the medical affairs department at SC Pharmaceuticals.
And guys, like Matt's like being really super humble. Like the guy's a freaking monster. His background's insane. And I'm really excited to share him with you guys. So a lot of people ask, like, Tom, how does this stuff come about? And how do you meet your guests and stuff? So I actually met Matt a year ago, pretty much, at Mass East, the Medical Affairs Strategic Summit East, which is interesting because we're co-promoting Mass East this year. So for anybody that is interested, you should really consider going to Mass East. It's in Jersey City, May 6th through the 8th. And if you use the code MSL Talk, so MSL TALK, no spaces, you get 25% off your registration. So just go to medaffairssummit.com, put in that code, and we'll see you in Jersey City. Guys, it's a great opportunity for networking. Sessions are awesome. And again, I met Matt there last year. We talked about doing a podcast. It took us a year, but here we are. So.
We're busy men. It is a great meeting, Tom. I was really impressed. So, is it still at the Westin in Jersey City?
Yeah, it's actually it's going to be at the same place as last year. So
okay.
It's
Nice.
good. Yeah, awesome. So we're going to jump into it, and we're going to talk about the role of the MSL in launch preparation and preparedness. So let's go back to kind of like the start of the launch process. I'm curious, like, how early does a company need to start to prepare for a launch?
I think my perspective, the earlier the better. But the
Okay.
challenge is, right, it's always you're in many times in a resource constrained environment. And I'll speak to my experience most recently at SC Pharmaceuticals, in the cardiology space. 12 to 18 months is ideal, right, to start building an MSL team, because it takes time to hire, develop, comfort and resources and consistency in the message. Trying to educate KOLs on whatever disease state you're in, right? So 12 to 18 months is ideal in my mind.
As far as the timeline.
Yes, before launch. Yeah, the
Before
timeline
launch. So you're
to
kind of
hire a team.
backtracking, right? So if you want to launch X date, you're like, all right, 12 to 18 months, and that should give you enough time to get everything done.
Yes, yeah. I mean, from an MSL hiring perspective, absolutely. I think 18 months is better because if you got the resources, but sometimes it doesn't always work like that. But it just depends on resources.
And so speaking of like resources, let's talk about the players. And starting with the MSL leaders and MSL managers and on the leadership side, what's their role in this process?
So usually it's coming up with the business case of hiring an MSL team and sizing needs, right? Like
Yep.
how big is the team going to be? Because many times, again, I'm speaking from a perspective where, we're a single product company where, we didn't have a commercial infrastructure in place, right? So we were hiring our first field folks, or field people were MSLs. So we wanted to hire, well-qualified, competent folks that had connections in the cardiology space, to be able to go out there and build some awareness and advocacy around SC Pharmaceuticals.
Mm.
So yeah, that we started that process 12 to 18 months before launch, and it involved, my perspective was, involved in hiring, both in setting the vision and strategy for that initial team, but also, working hand in glove with our chief medical officer on what that looked like, right? The territory size, who they would go, speak with, what are the KOL types that are important in this marketplace.
And obviously there's nuance, right?
Yeah.
Because every company's got to be a little different in the sense that therapeutic, there are different
Yeah.
variations from therapeutic area, rare disease versus something that's so like, what are there a million different factors that you have to look at?
There's a lot of different factors for sure. I mean, if you if you're in a situation where there's other products in play, like commercialized products, and you're now adding a new one or a new team to an existing team of medical folks, there's a lot of different factors that come into play, for sure.
Yeah. And then what about, so as we look into, so let's go to the next phase. So you have, you start the process, you have leadership in place, leadership comes in, and then you're building out the MSL team. So let's talk about the role of the MSL. What's the expectation? What are you looking for? How does that whole thing go?
So in a launch phase, I think it's important. I really believe finding an MSL that has some entrepreneurial spirit is really critical because it's very fast paced, right? And they need to be able to kind of get creative and strategic in how they pursue their KOLs. And also, again, in my situation, a small pharmaceutical company, there's a lot of other, I'd call it non-standard MSL activities that we asked them to do, whether it's helping assist with scientific resource development, writing standard response letters. Just because, again, starting small with limited resources, we didn't have the headcount, to have 10 people in house and then a 10-person MSL team.
Let's talk about, so that's interesting that you should mention that, because I know it sounds like in that launch phase, there's a lot that's required of the MSL. So
Yeah.
what's that training piece look like? And how is it implemented? And is it internal resources, external resources? What's your experience been on that?
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, we certainly we put our MSLs through about a 3-month training onboarding piece where involved most of them had some clinical experience in the actual therapeutic area, but if they didn't, there would be more didactic training on the clinical disease state piece. But certainly the product training and going through all that, and just the business process, but then just if we hired one or two folks this was their first time being in MSL, so there was some additional training that was needed on how to manage a territory, right? How to even outreach to a KOL. What do I ask them for a meeting? What are my objectives when I'm meeting with them? So 3 months was kind of our standard, but some folks kind of we extended that a little bit from a training perspective, and we also tapped into through the board certified medical affairs specialty program through ACMA. They have a I guess it's a certification program that I thought was really advantageous to folks that were first time MSL folks, and helping them to understand holistically not just the role of the MSL, but how it fits into the medical affairs organization and then even the broader organization. So that was a piece of our training platform as well.
Yep. Makes sense. So you're doing what you're trying to do as much as you can, obviously internally. Then you have some external resources. Depending on the tenure of the MSL, you get them to a certain level. And then it's like, okay, launch mode, everybody's out there, boots on the ground. And then you're basically running with it. At that point, what would you say? Because there's a lot of MSLs that listen to this show and they kind of want the answers to the test. Like, what would you say is most critical for the success of those people that are hitting the ground in launch phase?
In launch, I think it's to be, entrepreneurial again, and be confident in your approach to your KOLs. I mean, because ultimately your biggest role is going to be field engagement, right? I mean, it's making sure that you're able to connect and educate the doctors that you need to, your key opinion leaders. And so being I'd say entrepreneurial and strategic, and just willing to roll up your sleeves and get it done.
Yeah. And it's like, when you hear the word launch and you hear it's like there's this newness to it, and it sounds really exciting. Like, oh, I'm involved in a launch, and you get to put that on your resume, and everybody's like, pumped up about the newness of being involved in a launch. But let's talk about the other side of it, which is the stress. I imagine there's got to be a lot of pressure in these situations. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, there certainly is a lot of pressure, right? Because it's, launches come with a lot of expectation, right? And that comes both on the medical side, the commercial side, throughout the whole organization. So the pressures are high, and many times the asks when they come down from the executive team, the asks are to be done rather quick, and whether that might be a strategy change, or it may be, hey, we need to pivot and talk to this new KOL type, or we need to rethink our strategy on our medical resources and our educational pursuit. So the pressures, they can be immense. I think it's, that's why it takes, in a launch phase, I think you need to have a frank understanding as an MSL of, and be the phenotype that's comfortable with that, right? Because it can be higher pressure, higher intensity, because it's very important to the organization and to the executive team for that launch or that product to succeed.
And I'm sure there's a lot of eyeballs. So, right? There's eyeballs.
Yes.
And there's the constant discussion, and we talked about this at MAPS, and you talk about it at every conference. It's the value of field medical, and there's no bigger spotlight when it comes to that other than like a launch. So being in a launch phase is even a greater spotlight. So how do you establish, do you establish certain milestones and success factors that you look at through the process?
Yeah, so I think you're hitting on the factor. Once you're launching, if you're in year +1 of a launch, or the first 6 months of a launch, there are a lot of eyeballs, right? And I think some of the critical success factors from a leadership perspective is ensuring the importance of over communicating cross-functionally about what your team is doing, right? Up through the leadership chain, and especially through the commercial leadership chain, right? Because a lot of times our MSLs are providing account support needs, right? If there's an MSL educational need and that came through one of the the sales reps. And so making sure they understand that you're, compliantly working to assist them and help them in the educational needs within a territory. So, yeah, I mean, it's this over communication is key. And in terms of milestones and success factors, on our team, I mean, it's really, there is a bit of a reach and frequency, right? It's making sure, hey, you're seeing your select key opinion leaders a certain number of times a year. But we actually even went further and had our MSL team develop really thoughtful region plans to really hone in on these. We kind of rank our KOLs as national, regional, and local to really hone in on these national level KOLs and put some forward thinking strategy into what am I going to what's my objective with this KOL each year, and what am I going to accomplish when I meet with them, and when will I meet with them? And that's been very helpful, I think, from a success factor to keep the MSL in a launch phase focused on what's important and having an alignment all the way up through leadership.
That makes sense. It sounds like the priorities have to be set and organized really well in advance. Otherwise, you're just out there doing a bunch of activity.
Exactly. And I mean, part of it too, I mean, I'm kind of speaking, our organization, we started, and that's why I was saying the MSL phenotype in our company, needed to kind of be entrepreneurial. We didn't really, we knew who, let's say, the top 100 KOLs were, but we didn't really have an idea. We didn't do a KOL influence survey because we didn't have resources to do that. So it was, hey, let's hire some people that are esteemed in cardiology and that know some cardiologists, but let's have them go grow our network of KOLs. And so it was kind of the entrepreneurial pursuit of KOLs, asking, who else is influenced in this region? Who else is doing research in cardiology here? Who else should I talk to? And that's how we grew our network. But it does take a lot of planning too with that as well, right? And alignment with the team, for sure.
Yeah. So let's say you are sitting down to have lunch with another medical affairs leader who's about to start their launch process, and they're right in the beginning stages. What would you say to them as far as pitfalls and what to look out for, and what would you alert them to?
I would go back to that. Pitfall is lack of communication. Seriously, I mean, I can't stress that enough. That not communicating effectively, and whether you're an MSL or in a leadership role, it's in a small organization. It always amazes me how when our companies, when you're a small organization, you'd expect there to not be silos of activity, but there can be, right? And making sure that all the way up through the chain that there's understanding and alignment with what's happening at the field level and through the leadership level is crucial. And so a pitfall of not communicating effectively, I think can really set you up for some trouble.
And what about on the MSL side? So let's just say you're giving advice, you're giving a TED talk to a bunch of MSLs that are getting ready to be involved in launch phase, launch mode. What would you say? What advice would you give to them?
I'd say, be thoughtful. First, I'd say think about using resources, right, that are out there, like that BCMAS program, or there's a lot of papers and publications out there to kind of explain and understand launch, right? So that's a preparation piece, like prepare yourself, but also be nimble and be willing to meet the needs of the organization, because in a launch phase, some of the strategy and tactics can change rather quickly. And so I'd say be comfortable with change and be nimble is an attribute that they need to have.
And because you said resourceful. So
Yeah.
like and I'm just curious, I always bring this back to like hiring and how you onboard people. So do you look for people that have certain skills from, let's just say it's in tools and resources and technology and CRM and insights? Like, how much do you look at that sort of thing when you're interviewing?
I definitely do. I mean, I think it's important to have a very across a team that has different skill sets across your team, right? I mean, I don't look for everybody to have expertise in CRM, but I think it's important for somebody on the team to be a technology leader, right? So that they can do that kind of train the trainer approach, or lead the team. Same thing with medical insights. But I think one of the attributes, if you're asking from an MSL perspective, and especially in launch, that I look for is really that emotional intelligence, that ability to have a conversation, and be able to just flow naturally, right? Because that's at the end of the day, these key opinion leaders and these doctors, you have limited access to them, and you have to bring them something of value, but they're also human beings, right? You have to be able to connect the dots and connect with them. So that's a big piece when we're hiring and my team's hiring, that we like to, really focus on that emotional intelligence piece.
Oh, absolutely. It's always so important. And I'm not surprised to hear you say that. And especially since it sounds like you have hired junior level candidates, which is probably not always the case. Most times, whenever I see a team being built, or when we're building a team, we
Yeah.
do look for diverse skill sets and diverse backgrounds,
Yeah.
but we almost always look for more experienced types. So when you're
Yeah.
looking at those more junior, because there's a lot of aspiring MSLs that listen to this podcast. So when you're looking at those aspiring MSLs or junior MSL candidates, you mentioned emotional intelligence. What else are you looking for, considering the fact that they may not have done the role or have done it in a limited capacity?
Yeah, I'm also looking for drive, right? Showing that they can work hard and are willing to, again, be flexible and nimble, and do what needs to get done. Again, in a small organization, I always frame it in the interview that, I think it's a positive in that, there's going to be opportunities outside of just the educational role of the MSL for you to get involved with here, and it's going to be a learning curve, and we're willing to take you on that journey, but I'm going to need a lot out of you, right, in it. And you got to be willing, or I want somebody, a phenotype that's willing to do that. And so yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. I love that, because the thing is, you can't teach that drive. That's not something you can teach. I'll make the argument that you can teach emotional intelligence, but you can't teach motivation and you can't teach drive. That's something that really has to come from the person.
Yep.
And when you're interviewing, you have to be able to display that effectively. Would you
Exactly.
agree?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I think, they can, through their background and experience, whether they have been in MSL or not, you can see their work ethic and drive through their other work functions, right, or their other work experience. So I definitely agree with you.
Where do you see, as we go into, it's such an interesting time in pharma, and as we kind of go into the rest of this year, like, what do you see happening that, there's the talk, like all this talk about AI and technology and omnichannel and changes. There's all these buzzwords. Like,
Yeah.
what are you seeing? What's your opinion on where things are going?
I do think, this omni-channel or AI approach is changing the game a little bit. I mean, I
Mhm.
just was on an ACMA think tank about it, and I learned a lot from the colleagues that were on that panel. But even, our head of publications, leverages Chat GPT to help her become more efficient, right? Again, I mentioned we're in a limited resource and limited FTE perspective at my company. So it's not like, I have 10 people in publications to write manuscripts. So we can leverage some of these tools, but we're still learning, right? I mean, I think it's not quite there yet definitively. And I think organizations are still learning, how do you put some guardrails up that are appropriate with those technologies that are coming out. And last thing I would say too, in terms of like omni-channel, yeah, I do think KOLs are looking for new ways to digest medical content, right, and medical information. It may not just be the tried and true old, 2-3 page bulleted standard response letter, right? Are there new ways that we can engage and interact with our key opinion leaders and help them understand our product better? So
Love it. Matt, you're the man. Great advice, brother. Thanks for coming on. I know it only took
yeah,
us a year, but we did it.
we did it. We did it. Well, thank you for having me. This was really enjoyable.
Awesome, man. And guys, thank you for listening. Thank you for your support of this podcast. If you got some value in this, please share it with others, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. And if you enjoyed it, please subscribe so that you don't miss an episode in the future. And feel free to leave a rating or a review or a comment. Thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you soon.